as your moderator tonight. Our Step Up and Serve Community Forum is co-sponsored by the newspaper and the Public Policy Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Steamboat Springs Chamber Economic Development Council. Public policy plays a key role in our community's economic development efforts, and local policy initiatives must start with a pipeline of well-informed and passionate local leaders. The Public Policy Committee works annually toward a goal of increasing and encouraging community engagement as it relates to the important conversations taking place that set our community's future direction. In November of this year, Steamboat Springs voters will be electing 4 new city council members. Between 2016 and 2020, a large majority of open council seats went uncontested. And so tonight's event is aimed at educating community members about what it takes to serve on council and also in the community, with the hopes that more people will be encouraged to step up and serve. So before I introduce our panelists, I want to up front acknowledge that tonight's panel is a little male heavy, and that was not on purpose. From the start, we tried to put together a diverse panel of former city council members in terms of gender and also in terms of political leanings. And due to conflict, some of our former female city leaders were unable to participate. We also did not want to have council members who are eligible, who are currently serving on the council and eligible for re-election, because we thought that would give them an undue advantage when it came to running their next campaign. So I should note that Jason Lacey is currently serving on the council, but he is term limited, so he is not eligible to run in November. So that is why he's able to be on our panel tonight. So let's get on with the important part, the questions that we've prepared for our panelists. Let me introduce you, and then I'm going to let you guys tell our audience a little bit more about yourselves. So first up, we have Jason Lacey, Steamboat Springs City Council President, Bart Kanowski, former City Council member, John Quinn, another former City Council member. We have Gary Suter, Steamboat Springs City Manager, and Michael Marchand, who is a young professional and a very active community volunteer. So why don't we, want you guys take turns introducing yourself. Let's start with Jason.
Thanks, Lisa. So I'm Jason Lacey. I'm current City Council President. I am in my 6th year on City Council. Before that, I was on the City Planning Commission for about 6.5 years as well. So lots of time working at the city. And also, I'm an attorney in town. I'm partner with Steamboat Lawyers Group. I'm married to my wife, Dervla, and I have 3 young boys, ages 10, 7, and 4. So I have a busy life, and it's lots of fun.
Thanks, Jason. Bart, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Lisa. My name is Bart Kanowski. I've been in town since 1991. I served on the City Council for 5 years, from 2010 to 2015. 4 of those years, I was the City Council President. Nancy and I have raised our family here in Steamboat. They are long gone, which is a good thing, and I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, Bart. Next up, John, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. My name is John Quinn. I've lived in Steamboat since '97. I'm an owner-operator at Northwest Data Services since about '99. My wife, Tracy, and I have 2 daughters going into 10th and 8th grades. I was honored to serve on council from 2007 to 2011, and I've stayed involved in the community ever since. Been involved in various campaign committees from the YBHA 5A tax initiative, West Steamboat annexation, and most recently the school bond initiative. Feel privileged to live in Steamboat and want to thank all of you for taking some time to be involved here tonight as well.
Thank you, John. Michael, how about you next?
Hi, thanks, Lisa. Michael Marchand. I've lived in Steamboat going on 7 years now. I'm a real estate professional at Steamboat Sotheby's and with Bryn Gray Partners. I currently serve on the Young Professionals Network Board. I've been on that board for about 5 years. I'm on my second term as a Yampa Valley Housing Authority board member. And then I am the vice chair of the Chamber's Economic Development Council, and I am the chair of the Public Policy Committee. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Michael. And last but not least, Gary, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm Gary Suter. I'm the city manager for the city of Steamboat Springs. I am an appointed official, not an elected official. I serve at the pleasure of city council under an employment contract, much the same as the school superintendent Bragg Meeks or Sonia Fiddler at the hospital, where you're appointed and work for the board. So my job is to oversee all of the operations of the city, which is a complex job and a lot of fun. I've lived on the Western Slope since 1990 and married, 2 children. They're out of college, one in Denver, one in New York City. And they always encourage me and us, my wife and I, Fran, to always stay in the mountains because they always want a place to come to and have a retreat out of the big cities. So I will be celebrating my 5th anniversary here at the city of Steamboat Springs as the permanent city manager this Saturday, June 12th.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, first up, my first question, I'm gonna direct to Michael first. In your own words, please speak to the importance of community involvement and its effects on the community as a whole.
Thank you. Especially being on this call with, these leaders right here, I believe that when you have engaged leaders who are passionate about the issues and the opportunities that we face as a community, it really ensures that our quality of life is maintained and always improving. And, if we just sat back and let the cards fall where they may, we wouldn't have the community character that we all know and love. And what it's meant for me in my own experience is it's really given me a sense of ownership over the community issues that I'm passionate about. And the roles that I currently hold, I get to work on issues that are important to me, both personally and professionally. And those are, empowering young professionals and making sure they have opportunities to thrive in the Valley, addressing the lack of affordable housing, and then also economic development. And just, to your other point about, the effects that it has in the community, my employers are very supportive of my involvement, and that's made all the difference in the world. And, just how strongly I feel about, the work I do in the community and their support with that.
Thanks, Michael. Jason, do you want to field that question as well?
Sure. So for me, community involvement is something that I believe each of us owes to the community in general. If you're going to be a part of a vibrant and healthy community, then each one of us has to do our part to contribute in a meaningful way. So whether that's serving on council or a nonprofit board or volunteering for any of the great projects you see in the community, or checking on neighbors or people in need, doing some pro bono work, whatever it might be, these are all the things that add up and make a big difference in creating a community that you really want to be a part of. And I mean, that's, we have a beautiful place to live, but without, really the people, and being a part of, helping the people in your community, that it's not as meaningful unless you contribute in meaningful ways like that. And I grew up in a community much smaller than Steamboat, and I saw from an early age the value of looking after your fellow community members and stepping up and serving based on your own strengths and gifts. So that's what I've tried to do. And I see a lot of other people here with a similar mindset. And that's really a big reason why I love living in Steamboat.
Thanks, Jason. Next question. What motivated you to step up and serve as a city council member? Bart, we'll start with you and then let John answer it as well.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, I mean, the decision to step up and serve in your community is a personal decision, I think, to everyone. And so I'll tell you a little bit about my journey, but I think everyone's got a different story. I had been here for quite a number of years, was actively involved with numerous organizations throughout the community, and that just kind of morphed its way into knowing people, knowing peers, knowing individuals that had gravitated towards city council, planning commission, public service. And that's how I got interested in it. And then I just pursued that through the avenues of, going out and getting on the council. So, I mean, that's my personal journey, but I will want to say, because we're trying to encourage people to step up and serve, you don't have to have 30 years in the community to step up and serve. This community, if you are a smart, able-bodied person, this community will accept you after, a few years of being in town to step up.
Thanks, Bart. That's a good point. John, how about you? What was your motivation to step up and serve?
Yeah, thank you. And in 2007, I had some peers, business associates, friends encouraged me to run. I had just had my first daughter, was a new father and a small business owner. At the time, I felt like the city needed a voice to represent struggling families in this town more vocally. At that time, it was difficult to find daycare, impossible to find careers that enabled you to live in Steamboat, or challenging at a minimum. It's amazing to think that was 14 years ago, and now things are probably infinitely more challenging for the young families that are trying to raise kids in this town. The voices of the people who do step up into the spotlight in a small town like Steamboat are incredibly impactful. It is a small town. Issues are often divided fairly evenly, and you'll be amazed how much your voice makes a difference, in any particular campaign or issue or committee. So, often, school board bond election is a great example that was decided on very few votes. So, if you're the type of person who likes to be involved, who finds that they're willing to serve, who likes to be informed, and who has a passion for maintaining this community, I would say that this community could use your help.
Thank you, John. Next question. What is the biggest misconception about serving on city council, and where do you think that stems from? Jason, we'll let you take that one first.
Sure. I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have is that some people seem to have this perception that council members have lots of discussions with each other outside of regular meetings, and that we make decisions, outside of a regular meeting. And I can tell you that I don't see that occurring, but for several reasons. One, most importantly, it's illegal. That would be a violation of sunshine laws. Serial meeting is any meeting of more than 2 council members, outside of a notice meeting discussing public business. And that's just something we don't do and we can't do. And I think if you tune in to our meetings, if you have a little time on Tuesday evenings, you'll see that we really conduct real-time decision-making. And you can tell when you see we solve those problems through lengthy discussions, and we have lots of debate on major topics, and those discussions last a long time, and they often span over several meetings. So we really do real-time decision-making. So for anyone who thinks that votes are predetermined, they're not. And, I, for one, have been surprised as much as anyone on how many votes have turned out. And I think Gary can vouch for that. I've followed up with him after meetings and said, wow, a lot of times I didn't expect the vote to go that way. But I think that's one of the big misconceptions people have.
Thanks, Jason. Gary, just from a non-council, from your years of experience as a city manager, what do you think is something that you see council members, misconceptions that council members might have about serving?
Yeah, and I think Jason made a great point. I didn't think about that, but I've heard about that a lot, and I get a lot of questions. Well, what's the council going to do? How's their vote going to fall? You should know. It's like, if I knew how council was going to vote, I wouldn't be working. I can't predict how council is going to vote. So yeah, it's real-time problem solving. And that's a great point, Jason. I think that the point I'd want to make is I hear a lot that folks run, and they might run on a single issue, or, pick an issue, as too many dogs running around, or growth, or crime or whatever, and they think, well, I'm just going to get up there, I'm going to make a difference. It's much more complex than people think it is. That we're a complex organization. We've got so many things going on in this organization, and the issues are very complex too. And as John had said, they're often just really evenly divided in the community, and it can be very, very difficult for council members to make their decisions. Oftentimes, I'm sitting over there to the side as the manager, and we'll do a report, we'll give council the information, which is our job. But I'm glad I'm not sitting up there having to make these decisions, because they can be really tough. So I think it's a lot more complex. It looks easier than it really is, and it's a lot more complex than people think.
Thanks, Gary. So we know that people like to get a return on their investment, so to speak. So Bart, what has been the greatest, or what was the greatest reward to you of being a community leader, whether that be on city council or another organization you might be involved in?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I just enjoyed being plugged into the community, whether it was on city council or the other boards or the other activities I've been involved with. And, like Gary and Jason talked to, at city council member, you're going to make some decisions that probably aren't going to, people are not going to be happy with you. Maybe some of your good friends aren't going to be happy with you. But, probably the greatest reward would be just the thanks that you get from the community members by and large. Sometimes, yeah, you get, ripped to shreds in the paper or, at a council meeting, and that just kind of goes with the territory. But by and large, most of the people are just thankful that someone steps up, who has the best of the community interests in their interest, trying to make decisions to push the community forward.
Thanks, Bart. Michael, how would you answer that question? What are the rewards of community volunteerism, community service?
A slightly different answer, but sort of similar. I mean, I'd say aside from my own personal growth that I've experienced from serving, and I think back to, who I was when I first moved to Steamboat 7 years ago, is the people and the opportunities that it's opened up for me. I moved to Steamboat thinking that I would only be here for one season. And I can say, when I was applying for grad school, and I can say without a doubt that if it wasn't for my getting involved, that certain doors wouldn't have opened for me, and I wouldn't have developed this like intense connection that I have to Steamboat, and the passion that I have for the well-being of our community. And I just purchased my first home here, and I intend to stay here forever. And had it not been for these experiences that I've had outside of just my work and recreational life, I don't think I would have that pull that I do now.
Great, thank you. Next up, what does someone need to know to be an effective council member? Maybe some of the most important things. Let's start, Gary, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Lisa. I think, well, obviously, you should probably know something about your community. And I think it was Bart that said there aren't any really deep qualifications. You just have to meet an age requirement and residency requirement. But it does help to know something about your community. It helps to know something about the issues that your city is dealing with. And obviously, if you're going to campaign, you should know something about your platform that you represent. And it's okay to have a platform. As a staff member, we don't get political. We have to present objective information, but I think it's totally fine for council members and candidates to have an issue for which they stand or a platform. But I also think they need to know the value of compromise. When you're up there as one of 7, there are certain skill sets, and we can talk a little bit more about those later, but you need to know the value of compromise as well, because in order to get things done, there's a lot of give and take up there at the council dais, and you see it every Tuesday night.
Thanks, Gary. Jason, what do you think someone needs to know to be an effective council member?
Yeah, so first thing I would say is you need to know what you don't know. which will likely be a lot of things given the broad scope of city services and functions that we have to deal with. I mean, we deal with issues ranging from fire and EMS, police, public works, which includes streets, snow plowing, water and sewer issues, planning and development, parks and recreation issues, which covers Howelson Hill, golf, tennis, childcare programming. We have an airport, we have finance, we have HR, we have capital projects. So with such a long list, you have to be, ready and willing to listen to other people who might be experts on some of those subjects when you're not, whether that's staff members, other council members, or other community members who can really help inform you in making, your decisions. You also really need to keep an open mind as much as you can and really constantly question yourself about why your decisions are appropriate and be willing to change if you learn or see new information that changes your thinking. Sometimes your first reaction on an issue is right and sometimes it's not. And it's okay to change your mind. Sometimes people look at that as a weakness. I actually think it's a strength because I think it shows you can learn, adapt, and change your position in certain circumstances. And, I think that's, especially true since you can't be an expert on everything. So you have to really be, constantly thinking and questioning those things. And then you just really have to do your homework on all the issues. You read, you talk to community members, you listen to staff, and you really just make the best decisions that you can. And a lot of the decisions that you make are not, especially if they turn out to be incorrect or wrong, a lot of them are ones you can change and you can course correct. So, I could talk myself in and out of a lot of the decisions I've made and argue both sides, but it's really just doing your work, listening to the community and staff and making the best decisions that you can.
Thanks, Jason. John, what would you add to that?
Yeah, thanks. I think first and foremost, you have to know that you have the passion to devote a significant amount of your time to this role. You have to really have a desire to serve. I would completely echo Jason's comments about open-mindedness and preparedness. Preparedness is huge and helps a council meeting run smoothly. It's really important that council members show up having read the material, asked questions when they didn't understand it, and also show up with an open-minded perspective. You'll find you get 20 minutes into a particular issue and your fellow council members, city staff, and the citizens who come up to make comments all have important things to say and all approach these issues bringing their passion and their perspective. So that is absolutely critical, is the open-mindedness piece. I would say that there is a lot of learning involved, but you don't need to know everything about the city to get involved or even to run. The city staff will be happy to provide you a giant banker's box worth of materials that will take you several vacations to work through to get kind of a basic understanding of things. So you can get up to speed on things. The perspective of the citizen legislator, I think, is huge. And one of the things that I came away from my experience on council with was a real understanding that having citizen legislators is really important to having government function properly, because citizen legislators bring a different perspective than city staff does. As a city finance department, for example, in 2007, 2008, it was difficult for them to say the Great Recession is going to do anything but maybe give us a flat budget next year. Council members were able to see the economy taking a turn, see it hitting their own businesses, their neighbors, their families, and said, no, you really need to come back with a 20% reduction in sales tax revenue. As it turned out, the citizen legislators, who are not financial experts, were a lot closer in their estimates than city finance staff were. So that's why citizen legislation works and why it's important for those who want to step up.
Thanks, John.
Lisa, can I have a quick comment to add to that?
Yes.
John, I love your term preparedness. And I just wanted to note, the public can tell when a council is not prepared or a council member is not prepared. So it's really important to read your packets. And this council has a good reputation of being prepared, but yeah, it kind of becomes obvious. So great point.
Thanks, Gary. Next question. For those looking to get more involved, what is a good place to start, and what are some available resources that might help them, gain confidence to do something like that? Michael, let's start with you on that.
Thank you. Jason said this earlier, you kind of have to know what you don't know. And I think that a good place to start is just by getting informed, read the paper. We live in a community where our paper is easily readable. You can read that every single day. There's a lot of good information in there. Watching city council meetings. A lot of people don't know this, but most board meetings for nonprofits are open to the public. So attend those. And then once you kind of have your head wrapped around it, identify those issues and the causes that are important to you, and then seek out the groups that can connect you with those issues. The Young Professionals Network has been huge for me. It's what led me to my role with the Economic Development Council. The Chamber's website, the Yampa Valley Community Foundation, both have lists of nonprofits. I believe we have over 100 local service and educational groups in Routt County. There's truly something for most interest. I think the key is just to start somewhere. You never know where one seemingly simple volunteer opportunity is going to lead. And then two other programs that I have participated in that were huge in my learning more about the city were Leadership Steamboat that this chamber puts on, and then City 101. City 101 is a fantastic program for anyone that just wants to learn more about how our city functions. And it really gives you an insider look at the different departments and how our budgets are formed, what are the different roles, and I can't recommend that one enough.
Thanks, Michael. Jason, what would you add to that?
Yeah, for people that like to dip their toes in to get involved in city affairs, we have a lot of boards and commissions they could join. We have Planning Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission, Board of Adjustment, Historic Preservation. There's the Urban Renewal Area Advisory Committee, the URAC as it's sometimes called. We have the Golf Committee. We have an Ice Rink Advisory Committee, and we have other ad hoc committees that are formed at different times to help advise council on different things. Also getting involved in different nonprofits in the community really is a great avenue to get to know what's going on in the community. And we have so many good ones that touch so many areas of the community, and it's really hard to narrow it down and pick which ones you might like because they're all so good. But I mean, getting involved in just a few of those is great. And then just, watch council meetings, watch those board and commission meetings, and really learn about the issues that are, coming to the forefront in the community, and ask questions, reach out to council members, reach out to these board and commission members, and find out what's going on, and really, kind of do your homework before you're ready. And once you do a little background research, you'll be ready to decide whether you're ready to step in or not.
Thanks, Jason. Next question. From your perspective, what is the role of a council member? Gary, we'll start with you on that.
Wow, thanks, Lisa. That's a deep question. But I'm going to start off real high level with the basics. We're in a council manager form of government, and that's as dictated by our home rule city charter, and I can make reference to that later. But the council's job is high level. It's policy. So the council's job has a distinct policy role, where administration's job is more operations. And I like to simplify that by saying the council's role is the what, and the staff's role is the how. So it's really important that council members kind of stay in their lane. This council happens to be very good at that. When they tend to get in the weeds, into the how stuff, they tend to call each other out on that. When I say the how, it's like, telling the cops how to catch a crook, or telling the animal control officer how to deal with a customer, how to catch a dog, or how to patch a pothole. So once council gets to that level, they're really kind of in the administrative. There is some overlap with those roles, but really the council's role is primarily a policy role. They should not be, if you're a micromanager, by default, it's probably not a good idea to run for council. You'd be better off applying for a city job because the council role is high level, it's policy. I would say one of the other qualities that council members need to have, it's a majority vote decision-making model. So you're going to win and lose on votes often. And I'd have to say you have to win and lose with grace. So if you're a sore winner or a sore loser, or you gloat because you want to vote, or you're a sore loser, it's going to be a long term because you're going to be on the losing end of many votes. So those are some of the key roles of council members. But the big message here is that it's a policy-making role of city council, and those are the big what questions. They're passing the laws in the town. So that's the primary role of a council member.
Thanks, Gary. John, so from your perspective, what is the role of a council member and what qualities make for an effective council member?
Yes, thanks. Gary makes a great point. Really as council members, you have two employees or two people, who kind of operate, under your direction, and it's the city manager and the city attorney. Council members aren't in the business of day-to-day operations, and that is a really important point. As a council member, you're elected to represent your constituents, to be educated and learn on the issues, and then to vote your conscience. We're a representative democracy. Your job is not to take a poll of your constituents and vote the way that poll turns out, because in theory you know the issues much more deeply than the folks that you may run into in the grocery store, than your coworkers. And so you're kind of a liaison, I suppose, between policy and your constituents. So, if you're doing your job properly, yes, it's not about, sticking your finger up in the wind and seeing which way the wind is blowing. It really is about learning the issues, becoming educated about them, and then voting your conscience. It goes back to that question again or the points of preparedness and open-mindedness. You'll get into a lot of issues and approach it initially one way, and then as you lean more about it, realize that it's deeper or more complicated, or you'll be surprised that you come out on the other side of something altogether. It's important to note that when you're running for council and as a council member, you don't represent a party affiliation. It is an unaffiliated role. It's a very collaborative role. You will learn a ton from your fellow council members, from city staff, and from the public along the way. So it's not about knowing everything. It's about being an effective learner, and being there to take a vote and represent. Yes, and it's a great point about being open-minded about winning or losing on certain issues. We live in a very divided community oftentimes, and sometimes votes come down on a 4-3 a lot. No question, whichever, if you win a vote or lose it, you may have angered 55% of the people out there. So it is important to, understand that sometimes, sometimes you may feel the heat, but I think you'll be energized by the process. And there you go.
Thanks, John. Jason, what would you add?
Yeah, John and Gary did a great job on a lot of that. And I would just kind of add in that really your role as a council member is to be an effective advocate on all issues by looking out for the best interests of the community as a whole. And that's a hard thing to do whenever you're trying to balance, all the interests that, you see and you hear from in the community. I think I said earlier, I could, on a lot of issues, I could easily argue either way on a vote. And it's, so for people out there who think that we might be dismissive or just take things lightly and easily say yes or no on different votes, that's not how it works for me. And I don't think that's how it works for a lot of other council members either. The main qualities you need to be a good council member, You need to be community focused, really just focusing on the good of the community as a whole, not just focused on any narrow agenda that you may have or that someone's trying to push you to implement. Being open-minded, obviously, we've touched on that, being a good listener. And I think Gary made a really important point is, you can't hold grudges against other council members based on how certain votes turn out. Because if you do, you are really going to not like your time on council, and you're also going to be less effective because it's going to hinder your ability to get other things accomplished. So I think that's really important. The value of compromise is important. And probably, one of the hardest things for a lot of people, and one of the reasons they don't step up, is you need to really be able to withstand criticism. And you're going to get a lot of it, and you're going to get it on a lot of different issues. And the interesting thing is, some people, even some of the people that might criticize some of your decisions the most, if you engage with them and give them your rationale and reasoning behind it, they may not come around and necessarily agree with your point of view, but they'll at least respect your position and understand why you voted the way you did. And sometimes that's the victory that you'll get whenever you're dealing with tough issues in particular.
Great, thank you. Bart, what would you add on this question?
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, just a couple of items. One is that you are truly a policymaker, and you will enjoy your time much more if you realize that, rather than try to get down in the weeds and make individual operational decisions. So that takes a little bit of learning. And then the second thing I just want to bring out is that you need to be open and be able to listen, to the community in total, not just, your gang of buddies kind of thing, because it's really surprising. And I found this time and time again of what the public says is important to them. There would be issues out there that I would think, the public doesn't care at all about this. And man, you just get hit up with phone calls and emails and discussions, people wanting to stop and talk to you about that. And then there are other issues that you think, oh my, this is going to be a huge issue in the community, and the community just kind of nods and says, no, you're an elected city council representative, go ahead and make your decision. So a couple of points that I wanted to add there.
Thank you, Bart. Michael, what was something that's surprised you about serving in a community leadership position?
Let's see. I'd say that I've been surprised by how much of a real tangible difference you can make in a community like ours. Steamboat being such a close-knit and passionate community, you're not just a small fish in a big pond here. Many of the answers before this have touched on this, but we're a really powerful community, and you can actually work on an issue, see progress being made, and eventually see that change into action. And that's been really motivating for me to see things that I've worked on come to life. And so that's been really surprising.
Thanks, Michael. And John, I'll ask kind of the same question. What was maybe something that was most surprising to you about serving on city council?
We've touched on this a lot, but I think it's important to emphasize. I think one of the biggest things that shocked me about city council was the time commitment. It's easy to say, well, you've got, 3 to 4 meetings a month, and, I can handle that, no big deal. But there is much more to serving on the role effectively in order to do a good job at it. As a council, you divide up, a dozen, 20, additional roles that require attendance from a city council member, including things like airport commission or first impressions, planning, a chamber board. There are a significant number of meetings that fall during work hours, that sometimes fall outside of work hours. And so the time commitment is certainly not limited to meeting times of the council. Typically on a Thursday, as I recall, the packets for the following Tuesday would come out. When we were on council from 2007 to 2011, there was a lot of development activity going on. Packets often contained 800 pages, 1,100 pages sometimes. So to think it's kind of a little bit of light reading over the weekend to get brushed up for a Tuesday meeting is underestimating the workload significantly. Oftentimes you'll see stuff reoccur in packets, and so it's like you may see the same development application come through several times, but it is often hours of work on Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday, to get yourself prepared for a meeting. So don't underestimate the time commitment going into it. It is one of the reasons I did not run again in 2011 was I had 2 daughters by the time I got out in 2011, and between family commitments and the 80 hours a week I put in running my small business, it was daunting, and I wanted to make sure, you want to make sure going into this role that you have the time to devote to it. So don't be surprised by the time commitments.
Thanks, John. Next question. Bart, I'll start with you. Can you describe a difficult issue or situation that you experienced during your term on council, and how did you respond, adapt, and overcome?
Yeah, well, thanks, Lisa. I've got a couple items for you. One is I was on the council over 3 different councils, and it was really interesting every time a new election came in, how the players on the council changed. And as a council member, you had to adapt and change. You got to know and could understand maybe a lot of the individuals that you were working with on the council. And then after 2 years, some were gone and some others replaced them. So that was always an ongoing, I don't want to say challenge, but it was an ongoing something that you had to deal with that I didn't even think about as I jumped into it. Sometimes you look at those guys in Washington, D.C. or wherever they're at, and they're there forever and ever. And that's not the case because of the way we're set up here in Steamboat Springs. And then another just interesting issue that I had when we were on the council was when the marijuana legislation came into place. And, that was one that I thought the community would, want to know about, but it kind of simmered in the background for a long time. And then it just exploded. And yes, you had to be ready because the people were talking to you in the city streets, in the supermarket, at the gas station, at the high school game. And, that's very enjoyable to me, but you just needed to know that that was an issue that you needed to really be brushed up upon. And, those are issues that could happen to anyone, coming on the council or looking at running for the council in the future.
Thank you, Bart. Jason, how about you? What was maybe a difficult situation you've experienced and how you dealt with it?
Yeah, interestingly, one of the tough things I had to deal with was actually turned out to be one of our big successes, which was working through and completing the combined law enforcement facility with the county. For a lot of reasons that I don't maybe understand, there's apparently a lot of history for decades between city councils and county commissioners maybe not having a great relationship. And for whatever reasons, there was some levels of distrust that have kind of been there for a long time. But in my terms on council, we've really tried to change that dynamic, and we've had more regular joint meetings, and we've tried to work on partnerships on various projects. And when we started the discussion with the county commissioners on the combined law enforcement facility, it wasn't easy, and we really reached a couple points where I didn't think we were going to proceed, and we were probably going to be looking at going on our own, and the city really needed a new facility for our police department. But council persisted. Pleasant persistency prevails is kind of what we tried to do on that front, and really eventually through a lot of dialogue and we got some buy-in from the county commissioners. We were able to reach agreement. We built the CLEF, which saved taxpayers a lot of money by combining a facility instead of having 2 standalone facilities for city and county. And, our partnership also garnered us $1 million from DOLA, from the Department of Local Affairs, from the state, to help us build the project. So that was something that started out pretty tenuously, and it ended up being a win-win-win for council, the county commissioners, and the community.
Thanks, Jason. John, how about you?
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah. So one thing that is really important in a small town like Steamboat is recognizing when you may be conflicted out of a particular issue. If you're in business in Steamboat and serving on council, you'll find that there are going to be a lot of issues that you may find yourself conflicted out on. In any quasi-judicial setting, if you have a business interest, a personal interest with somebody who has brought an issue in front of the council, in a lot of cases, it's inappropriate for you to make a judgment on that. It's one of the reasons why there are 7 council members up there, so that the balance can still serve or still vote on an issue. I found myself often conflicted out of issues, because as an IT, we're an IT firm, and we end up doing business with a lot of other folks in town. In one particular instance, when I was serving on council, I had a developer who was seeking council approval that we had a business relationship with insinuate to me that I should forgo my responsibility to step down from voting on their application in order for me to continue doing business with their group. That was stinky. At the time, I told that business person that they should take their business elsewhere. I contacted the city attorney and I let him know about the conversation, and he passed that along to the rest of council and the city management team. One of my most trusted advisors, my father, had told me when I was diving into city politics that I should evaluate every decision based on how it'll look splashed on the front of the paper. And I think that was a really important lesson to learn, and one that I certainly took to heart. You may be placed in an uncomfortable position by those who are kind of seeking to pursue, to further their own goals. In my case, I've found that over the course of my 4 years, that there were some companies that chose not to do business with my team because they felt like I might have to step down on an issue for them. And I think there were people who did choose to do business with us because they thought it would somehow gain them an advantage. But in either way, it's your job as a council member to make sure that you're evaluating those decisions very carefully, and that you don't put yourself or your council in a position where it looks to have any kind of influence other than a genuine interest for the community at heart. Most importantly, I think you want to think about your fellow council members. And make sure that council has a reputation, of always performing its duties above board. In a small town like this, you would never want a council to be perceived as being influenced by business relationships. So, yeah.
Thank you, John. Next question, Gary, this one is for you. What is the one tool or resource that you would recommend for those seeking a city council seat utilize to prepare themselves for their new role, or even to run, I guess, as well?
Yeah, great question, Lisa. And I could delve into that banker's box that John referred to and pull any document out of there. But I think the one I would probably recommend would be the community survey. It's a statistically valid community survey, which covers a whole plethora of issues and city services and how they rank and how people perceive them, as well as other issues such as short-term rentals, which is the hot button issue of the day. And so there's a lot of data in there that I think could really help inform a potential candidate. Our community survey, which was just completed recently and just reported out to council.
Thank you, Gary. And this next one is also for you, Gary. What are the qualifications to run for city council?
Well, I think it was mentioned earlier, there aren't many deep qualifications for that. And it is a citizen-run legislature, so to speak. So you've got to be 18 years old, minimum of 18 years old. And I'm looking at the Home Rule Charter here, which is another really good document for people to look at. I mean, this is the Constitution of the city, basically. It was adopted by the people. You'll see here, 1973. And adopted by the people can only be amended by the people, but that basically provides all the guidelines and rules. And it says that you need to, and then we're also governed by the state law as well. So you need to be 18 years of age and you need to live in your district. And we go by districts, 1, 2, or 3, at the time that your nominating petition is filed. So it's a little bit complex because our city charter is more restrictive than state law that says you need to live in your district at the time the nominating petition is filed. State law says you need to live in your district for 1 year, but our city charter preempts that. And so those are the qualifications. You need to be 18 years of age. I believe by the time that election date occurs, and I think that is November 2nd, 2021. So you need to be 18 by November 2 and live in your district at the time that your nominating petition is filed. So not a lot of qualifications required, but really the qualifications that you need is everything that everybody talked about earlier here. So.
Thanks, Gary. So another piece that I think people need some information about is what it takes to run a campaign: time commitment, financial obligations, various legalities. So we'll let John and Jason address that. John, let's start with you. What, and maybe some tips for running a successful campaign.
I think times have changed a bit since my campaign run in 2007. I'm almost embarrassed to tell you all that back in 2007, I raised over $20,000 to run a campaign for city council. And a lot of the races were similarly financed. It was a very controversial time to be running. It was time when Steamboat 700 was coming through for an annexation proposition. There were a lot of development on the roster, and things have, to an extent, I think, quieted down quite a bit in terms of how much controversy there is around campaigns. The last few election cycles have shown that, in a great number of cases, unopposed candidates, ran. I think Bart may have been unopposed, although I can't remember for certain. And certainly in those cases, your obligations to raise money dwindle significantly. Assuming that you're in a contested race, it is not unreasonable to assume that you may need to raise $5,000 to put on an effective campaign in order to get advertising out there, in order to have an event here or there. In order to have volunteers go knock on doors and provide them pizza and sodas afterwards. Yard signs are a big portion of that expense. You may spend $1,500 to $1,800 on yard signs, if it's something that you're serious about getting into. So you should anticipate a need to do some fundraising, but these days I would assume that number is probably very small. During the course of a campaign, you will be asked to participate in a couple of events. The Pilot Today will put on one of them. Other groups in town may also, and you may have other groups reach out to you to ask for meetings, to inquire about positions you may have. So you'll have there will be some impact on your time for sure. Everybody will tell you that knocking on doors is hugely impactful, and it is in a town our size. Just getting out there and introducing yourself to your friends and your neighbors and asking them to support you makes all the difference in the world. And so getting out there and knocking on doors is probably still the most effective way to run a campaign.
Thanks, John. Jason, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up that we've had a lot of uncontested elections, because I'm the only current council member that had a contested election both times. So I had to run a campaign each time, and it does take some time. However, it's pretty condensed, the timeline, because really candidate packets are only available in August for you to even start getting your petition signed. And then the campaigning really begins, say, end of August through, October, until you get up to election day in early November. So it's a pretty condensed timeline, although it can be pretty busy if you're really committed to running, a strong campaign. for me, I did a lot of things from email blasts to my contacts, the yard signs that John mentioned, which seems to be a really popular thing here. I ran some pilot ads, both online and in the paper. I did some radio ads, a couple with my kids, which was kind of fun. I even held a couple of events to talk with people and find out what was on their mind. So John mentioned the candidate forums. You have to be ready for that. And depending on how many contested races there are, you may just have a couple of those forums, or you may have 4 or 5. I remember back in 2015 when I ran the first time, I think we had 5 forums, because that was the last time we had a lot of candidates. We had 11 candidates for 4 spots back in 2015. And it would be great to see that kind of interest again. And then on finances, I think John is right. You need to be able to raise a few thousand if you have a contested race. If you're not contested, then you don't really have to worry about it. But that's a hard thing for some people to ask for money. I know that's not easy, but you'll be surprised. People really want to support people that are passionate and really interested in serving. And a lot of times people are just glad to see somebody stepping up instead of them. So that's always good to see. And I think that would cover running a campaign for me.
Thanks, Jason. And last question before we kind of turn it over to Gary to give us some really specific information about running for council. What is the weekly time commitment, Jason, for city council right now?
Yeah, so right now we have 3 meetings per month. We meet the first, second, and third Tuesday each month. First and third Tuesdays are regular meetings where we vote on regular items, ordinances, resolutions, and things like that. The second Tuesday is a work session night where we just talk about policy and other issues. No formal votes are taken on those nights. So you have to go to those meetings. Those can be a few hours each. As we talked about earlier, preparedness, reading your packet, which could be several hundred pages each week, takes time, and you need to do that work so you're ready to make those meetings effective. And so it helps the conversation not, kind of flutter and go in different directions, which it can if you're not prepared. And then, a lot of people don't recognize that, council members, we also have to serve on a lot of other committees and boards as well as part of being on council. So, that could be anything. For me, I've been our member on the chamber. I've been involved in the Economic Development Council. I've been on First Impressions in the past. We have council members that serve on other, committees, Airport Commission and some other committees like that. We also have some various state and regional trade groups, CML, Colorado Municipal League, CAST, Colorado Association of Ski Towns. We're also part of Northwest COGS, Northwest Colorado Association of Governments, and we have different representatives from council that attend some of those meetings. And then really you have to spend some time with community members as well, fielding their emails, calling them, returning their calls and emails, which is something I try to do. We get a lot of emails and I try to be vigilant about that because when people reach out, you want to be responsive and be respectful that they've taken the time to do that. And for me, I'm in the president role. I do have to take a little extra time to help work on agendas and setting those and working with Gary and the management team to make sure those are coordinated and that we get, the right amount of items in each meeting. So for me, a weekly commitment could be anywhere from 10 to 20 hours. And, so in a month, it could be 40 and well over 40 hours in some months, just depending on how busy it is that month and what the big issues are of the day.
Thanks, Jason. So now we are going to end with Gary kind of giving us some basic information about how to run for city council if someone listening has been inspired to step up and serve.
Right, and Jason, you reminded me that you guys are also highly compensated. No, I'm just kidding. You do get some nominal amount from the city for running for council. It's not a full-time professional position. But what's your salary? What do you get, 1,000 or 1,200 a month, something like that? Do you know?
It's less than that shows up in my bank account, Gary.
Okay. And council members is less than that. So there is some compensation for those hours. You probably end up making, 50 or 75 cents an hour. I'm not sure. But yeah, I'm going to read from the candidate packet here. It's important to know I'm going to hit some dates and timelines here. Election day is Tuesday, November 2nd of this year, 2021. There are 4 council positions open, and we have 3 districts in the city, and those districts are mandated by the Home Rule Charter, which I showed earlier. District 1 has an opening. It's a 4-year term that expires in November 2025. District 1 is roughly, I'm going to give you rough boundaries here. Looking at the map, it looks like it's west, kind of northwest part of town, west of 5th Street downtown, and then taking in all of the commercial industrial district and up to the airport. So that is 1 position open. There's 1 position open in District 2, which is basically Midtown. So it goes from 5th Street southeast down to, looks like Mount Werner Boulevard and up Central Park Avenue and kind of the whole Midtown area, Central Park Plaza and so forth. And district, and there's 1 position open there, and then also 1 position open in District 3, which is basically the mountain, all the residential areas, condo land as it's affectionately referred to, that's District 3, and that's also a 4-year term. There's 1 other position open that is an at-large position that does not have a residency requirement, and that's a 2-year term. So that position expires in November 2023. So there are 4 positions open, 1 in each of the 3 districts and 1 at large. Nomination petitions will be issued on August 3rd of this year. So August 3rd, you can look for that from the city clerk's office, and they are due on August 23rd. So you have about 3 weeks to get signatures. And I understand if you're running in a district, you're required to get 25 signatures. If you're running at large, it's double that. You need to get 50 signatures. So those petitions can be obtained from the city clerk's office. And again, a candidate for city council must be a resident of the district that they are representing at the time that your nomination petition is filed. And again, those are due on August 23rd. So those are some of the key dates. There's another key date, which is September 2nd. That's a Thursday. There's a candidate information form and a drawing by lot, which really, they just draw by lots, and that's how your name will appear on the ballot. The election is going to be a coordinated election through the Routt County Clerk and Recorder's Office. We have an intergovernmental agreement with them. And you can't forget that you got to file reports with the Secretary, I think it's the Secretary of State, might be the city clerk. I'll have to check on that.
Those go to Julie.
Yeah, Julie Franklin, our city clerk. I believe there's a couple of dates in October, October 12th and October 29th, where you need to file your funding reports of your contributions to the city clerk and keep track of those. So they want to know where those campaign contributions are coming from. And then last but not least, November 9th is the last day to remove your election signs. So don't forget to do that, particularly if you've been elected. So you want to leave a good impression with your constituents. But that's what I've got. And any of you, I really appreciate everybody's insightful answers. If I missed anything, let me know.
Awesome. I just want to thank all of you for being part of this panel. I thought everything you shared was really insightful and inspiring, and thank you for your service to the community. And then on behalf of the Public Policy Committee and Steamboat Pilot and Today, I want to thank everyone who was tuning in tonight. And it is our hope that in November, we see a really bulky ballot with a lot of names on it. And also for those that might not be ready to serve on council quite yet, there are so many groups out there, advisory committees that could really use your expertise. And in my job, I get to hear a lot of good things, but I also get to hear a lot of people complaining about things. And I'm always happy to listen. But what I often tell them is if you are unhappy about something, the best way to fix that is to get involved. I think Michael said, she's involved in things she's passionate about. And we are a passionate community, which I love. So again, I just encourage people to get involved and start small maybe, and everything you do will make a difference. So thank you all tonight for tuning in, and I hope everyone has a great evening. Thank you.